All rise. Veuillez vous lever. Please be seated. Veuillez vous asseoir.
Judgement doer.
L'audience est reprise.
We shall resume.
Madame, vous avez la parole.
Counsel, over to you.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Prosecution. Thank you, Your Honour.
So I will restart with showing you an overview of the city of Timbuktu itself. And now you really do see it, hopefully on your screens with the satellite view. I will go slowly through the various sites that are represented during this presentation. Their respective names are visible on the left side on your screen, on the left tab. Each site is composed of various imagery, be it drone imagery or HD photographs taken by experts in this case, or simply video footage taken by people who witnessed the events, footage which were later on, for some, published in open source, local or international media. This footage includes crimes being committed. Due to the size of the platform, some videos may take a few seconds to load or to play. Throughout the occupation, Mr. Hassan performed his job as commissaire. The reality being that the way he performed it meant he was regularly committing grave crimes. Mr. Hassan and his men constantly patrolled in town on a daily basis, day and night. Members of the police sent on dispatch by Mr. Hassan operated checks and inspections in streets, markets, stores, and even people's homes. I'm going to show you now two of these markets as an example. One is located northwest of the city. It's here, I'm pointing at it now. It's called Le Petit Marché, or Yobutao. This is a place where multiple crimes occurred, in particular floggings. Another market is located here. I'm pointing at it now and I will zoom so that you see better. It's represented by this rectangle shape here. I'm hovering above it now. And that's Le Grand Marché, or Yoboubert. This is also a place that is a crime scene. I will get back to it later. Of course, I will not show you some specific stores or homes because we're in open session. But what to keep in mind is that the occupation of the group is extremely widespread, because every time you see a circle on this map, it corresponds to an area for which we have evidence in various forms of the presence of members of the armed group, including the Islamic police. Now, I mentioned a moment ago that members of the Islamic police were patrolling in streets. They did so usually by car or by motorcycle, and I will show you an example of that. We're gonna head to the Gouvernorat. You've heard it yesterday. The Gouvernorat was the second headquarters of the Islamic police. Here we are. That's the Gouvernorat, and there is the fence around it. Video footage show the accused men patrolling around town and congratulating themselves on the successful implementation of their new rules. In particular, the dress code for women and the security they imposed in public places, such as the market, which I just showed you. For this particular video, it's only an excerpt of a few seconds. I would kindly ask if we could please remain in open session, but not broadcast the image and the sound outside of the courtroom.
I'm afraid it is not possible to not broadcast the sound outside of the courtroom. We need to go into private session.
Can I please request that we go in private session? It should be less than 2 minutes display.
Judgement doer.
Fine. Private session. Yeah. Madame la greffière,
Court officer.
Nous sommes en audience
The
publique, Monsieur le Président.
court officer. We're in open session, Your Honor.
Madame la
Judge
procureure,
Mindira, my thanks. Counsel?
The work performed by Mr. Hassan went way beyond the city limits that you see on this map. My colleague Ms. Lupin mentioned it yesterday that Mr. Hassan men were going to Lere. And Al-Hassan himself invested a case there in Lere. It was a murder case. And this is approximately 400 kilometers away from Timbuktu. Another witness further tells us that Al-Hassan instructed an MNLA officer to intercept an ICRC stolen vehicle. They caught that vehicle in Boni, which is located over 300 kilometers away from Timbuktu. So what does that tell us? Simply that people listened to Mr. Al-Hassan and followed his orders, even if they were part of another armed group, and even if that goes well beyond the city limits of Timbuktu. When he or his men were not patrolling in the city, Al-Hassan was sitting in his office being located at the BMS, where the police was at first, or at the Gouvernorat, place we've just seen, where the Islamic police moved towards end of August, beginning of September 2012. He would receive people there. Mr. Al-Hassan dealt with numerous complaints coming from the population. We have documentary evidence of no less than 70 of them that he either signed and or drafted. You will see it during the course of the trial, and you just had a sneak peek preview with Mr. Alafi before. Mr. Al-Hassan would also provide interviews from his office. So let me show you what I mean. And we're going to go first with the BMS to illustrate what I'm saying. We're entering now the premises of the BMS to go all the way to the office that you see here. That's how it looked after the events. And you should see in a moment how it looked where Mr. Al-Hassan was in it. So you see him here. He's sitting at his desk. He has his walkie-talkie. And there are two men sitting next to him and weapons on the table. What is discussed on that day is a case about an arm deal between these two men. And the problem is that allegedly the buyer failed to pay the money. So Mr. Al-Hassan is mediating on that day and is deciding on the way to proceed. The next video I will show you, we're going to go to the second headquarters. So we're going back to the gouvernorat. Again, we're inside of the building now, and you will see people entering the building and people waiting for their turn to be received in an office. And I will ask you to have a specific look at one of the armed members of the Islamic police that you will see on this video, who is sitting on the chair, and you can easily recognize him because he's wearing that specific blue vest of the Islamic police. And I will ask you please to pay specific attention to the yellow folder that he's holding in his hands. So this is the man I was describing before I played the video. And the yellow folder he's holding is important. Why? Because those are the folders that were retrieved in 2013 from the Hôtel La Maison, which was the siège of the headquarters of the Islamic Tribunal. And they contain the reports that were drafted and or signed by Mr. Al-Hassan, and that would then be sent to the tribunal for sentencing. So you will see them later as well in videos of the Islamic Tribunal. The next video I would like to show you is a video interview of Mr. Al-Hassan. And for the benefit of the interpreters, the translation is available at MLI-OTP-0069-7539. The video is in Arabic.
How are you both? May the peace and mercy of Allah be upon you. How are our dear policemen? All right? Can you tell us about what you do here in Timbuktu? By Allah. By Allah, may the peace, mercy and blessings of Allah be upon you. May the peace and mercy of Allah be upon you. How are our dear policemen? By Allah, everything's fine. Praise be to Allah, just great. How are you? Well, by Allah, praise to be to Allah, thankfully as Allah willed it. What are you going to tell us about the police's mission here in the town of Timbuktu? By Allah, the work done by the police, the work done by the Islamic police is just ordinary work. We do have a lot of work, and the type of work done by the Islamic police is well known. What I mean is the type of work we do. Such as what? Of course, it involves patrols within the town and correcting. The Arabic booth is signifying that she is unable to hear the substance of the video and therefore unable to interpret. Message relayed from the Arabic booth through the English booth to the floor.
Message aux interprètes.
Court officer.
Il vous suffit juste de lire
Message
et
to
d'interpréter la vidéo.
interpreters. You simply need to read the text that you have been given. There's no need to provide interpretation per se.
لا الحمد لله رب العالمين بعد إقامة الحدود كل شيء اختفى إلا حاجات خفيفة بسيطة الحمد لله.
How are you both? May the peace and mercy of Allah be upon you. How are our dear policemen? All right? By Allah, thankfully, everything's just perfect and fine. How are you all? You're well? Yes, thankfully. Praise be to Allah. Blessed is Allah. What are you going to tell us about the type of work the police do here in the town of Timbuktu? By Allah, may the peace, mercy and the blessings of Allah be upon you. May the peace and mercy of Allah be upon you. How are our dear policemen? By Allah, everything's fine. Praise be to Allah. Just great. How are you? Well, by Allah, praise be to Allah, thankfully as Allah willed it. What are you going to tell us about the police's mission here in the town of Timbuktu? By Allah, the work done by the police. The work done by the police, Islamic police, is just ordinary work. We do have a lot of work, and the type of work done by the Islamic police is well known. What I mean is the type of work we do. Such as what? Of course, it involves patrols within the town and correcting objectionable acts, any type of reprehensible act which has been forbidden by Allah. Praise and glory be to Him. Such as drinking alcohol, smoking, and a woman adorning herself, and other such acts, praise be to Allah. It involves running the town's affairs, particularly with respect to traffic, the market and elsewhere, and ensuring the whole town's security day and night. How can it be understood from this? Is theft widespread or... No, praise be to Allah, thankfully, theft's on the decline. It's become very limited. How many thieves do you have in prison at the moment? We don't have a single thief in prison at the moment. You don't have any thieves in prison? No, just one, a drug dealer. He was arrested, praise be to Allah. Praise be to Allah. About how the bandits, have they disappeared or are they still around? No, praise be to Allah, the cherisher and sustainer of the worlds. Once the Haddad punishments were implemented, everything stopped, apart from minor things, praise be to Allah, and those are being dealt with. With respect to the rural areas and the remote desert zones, do you have a committee which sends out vehicles or patrols periodically? Yes, we're always dispatching vehicles and missionary expeditions. Praise be to Allah, the cherisher and sustainer of the worlds. The people do have weapons, unintelligible. By Allah, weapons are available. However, there was no There's no problem. Weapons are available. The people are all armed. Anyone who has enough money to buy a weapon does so. How many thieves have had their hands chopped off in this town? In Timbuktu, only one hand has been chopped off. Only one hand has been chopped off, and only one murderer has been executed. And then 2 or 3 perpetrators have been flogged. I think it was 3, as well as the alcohol. 2 alcohol drinkers who were flogged. And that was the end of the, now praise be to Allah, alcohol-related cases have stopped. We don't have any at all. And the same goes for theft and for murder too. Ever since the day that one murderer was executed, there haven't been any more cases. Praise be to Allah. With respect to the inhabitants, are they complying and cooperating with you? Oh yes, indeed yes. There are crowds of inhabitants in front of the police station every day. There are debt-related issues, social issues and so forth, divorce, and all sorts of issues every day. As far as debts are concerned, have they all been paid back? Do people settle their debts? Yes, some are paid back on schedule, and some require, because most people are poor here, that's why we give them a little time limit of 1 or 2 months, and some are referred to the court. May Allah bless you. What are the salaries of the Islamic police? It is for the sake of Allah's cause. May Allah bless you.
So Hassan is being asked how things in Timbuktu are, and by listening to him, you would think that all is well in the best of worlds. But what is he really saying here? Mr. Hassan justifies the actions of the police in this interview, dating from November 2012, where he confirms that the Islamic police applied physical punishments and practiced floggings, an execution, and an amputation, that of Dede Umaiga. Mr. Hassan not only justifies these actions sitting comfortably in his office, he takes part in them. He arrested and detained Dede Umaiga before the poor man got amputated in public following a judgment by the Islamic Tribunal. He flogged several victims in public. He took part in the execution. Mr. Hassan is correct. Only one execution took place during the occupation by the groups. One man was shot dead because he had been convicted for murder, and the family of the victim claimed his blood. Although not specifically charged, this shows yet again Mr. Hassan's role very well. I will show you where it happened. So we're going now again northwest of the city. In a place that is located between 2 hotels, the Hotel Buktu and the Hotel Azalai. I will show you on the panoramic view. So we are now at the Hotel Buktu. And if I turn a little bit, that's the hotel. Now we have our backs against the hotel, and if you look further than the 3 trees that you see in front of you, that's the other hotel. And this sandy area between these 2 hotels is the place where the amputation took place, and it's also the place where the execution took place. Regarding this execution, Mr. Hassan was present on that day. Mr. Hassan drove the man to the execution site. Mr. Hassan took him out of the car of the Islamic police. And Mr. Hassan participated in the execution. Mr. Hassan waited several hours for the man to die, because the man did not immediately pass away from the bullet that missed his heart. He was in agony for several hours on the sand that you see here on your screen. And Mr. Hassan, together with others, were discussing what to do about this situation when the man did not immediately pass away, if they could shoot another bullet or not. Meanwhile, the man was dying on that sand. Following his death, it's Mr. Hassan who brought his corpse back to the morgue. At every key event where his idea of justice is served, Mr. Hassan is present or actively participates in some way, be it an execution, an amputation, or a flogging. Mr. Al-Hassan's work was not confined within the four walls of his office. His work did not only consist in dispatching men and writing reports at his desk. He took it outside, in open spaces, and preferably places where his idea of justice could be seen and taught to everyone. From that moment, we can no longer talk about complainants and respondents addressing a police officer. We can only talk about victims of extreme violence being tortured, humiliated, mutilated in public by Mr. Al-Hassan and his men. Rapes, torture, floggings, amputation, detentions in inhuman conditions, persecution of the population based on gender and religion, and destruction of what the population believed in and worshipped for centuries. This is what Mr. Al-Hassan is involved in and willingly got himself into. Let's talk about the responsibility of Mr. Al-Hassan, starting with the crime of torture, cruel treatment, other inhuman acts, and outrages upon personal dignity. These are counts 1 to 5. Several floggings took place in Timbuktu in 2012-2013. One important aspect to point out in relation to these floggings is that not everyone could flog. Witnesses tell us that it was seen for the groups as a privilege, as an honor to be the one allowed to flog the victim. You will see such evidence during trial, and you will now see that Mr. Al-Hassan was personally involved in several of these floggings. I will show you some examples of that. We are heading now to the Sankore Square. You see it now on your screens. The first example of flogging I will mention is the flogging of June 2012. Al-Hassan is present on that square, together with other members of the Islamic police, such as Abu Zar and Adam, at the first public flogging organized in Timbuktu against a couple for alleged adultery. Several witnesses identify Al-Hassan in video images, dressed in his Islamic police vest. He too identified himself and confirmed his presence during this flogging. But even if he did not, it's hard to miss on the video footage. Let me show you what happened. I will only play very short excerpts. Every time the platform is moving because it's geolocating where exactly the video was taken. You see already that they're heavily armed and some of them are obviously wearing the vest of the Islamic police. And the last video I will show you for this particular flogging is the following. I don't even need to play it. You see already here that this man who's wearing the Islamic police vest and who's having a phone conversation while the woman is being flogged, this is Mr. Al-Hassan standing there. second example of flogging. This will take us to another location, which is the Petit Marché, or Yobutao. It occurred in July 2012. Hassan led and physically participated in the public flogging of 2 young men for drinking alcohol at the Yobutao marketplace, which you see now. Hassan conducted the operation on the ground from beginning to end, with other members of the Islamic police, such as Abu Dar and Abdallah al-Burkinabe. Hassan himself acknowledged being one of the persons who flogged the 2 victims. But yet again, even if he did not, is hard to miss on the video footage. For that flogging, I will only show you one video excerpt. So what you see here is these 2 men walking in front of us now. They're handcuffed. Those are the 2 victims, and they are being escorted to the place where they will be sentenced by several members of the Islamic police, which you can easily identify because, yet again, they're wearing their vests. And the man who's on the right side of the screen now, who's holding the whip and following the escort, this man here, this is Mr. Hassan, on the right side of your screen. It's him again here that you see holding the whip, and it's also him who's in charge of the handcuffs. So he has the keys and he's about to give them to another member of the Islamic police so that he removes the handcuffs from the 2 men. Here, it's also him who's in charge of telling the victims how to position themselves for the sentence. And this is Mr. Hassan's turn to whip the first victim. And this is Mr. Hassan whipping the second victim. As you can see, those sentences were really carried out in public, including in front of very young children. And as demonstrated by this video and several witness statements, they were really meant to scare the population as a whole. The third and last instance of flogging that I will show you occurred in January 2013. It's at the Yubutao market as well. Hassan is also present during the public flogging of 3 different couples at the Yubutao marketplace. An eyewitness recalled that Hassan was present on that day, and he identified him in video footage. I will show very short excerpts. Already just from the screenshot of the video, you can tell that the flogging has already started and the man is already bleeding on his back, and you can see it through his t-shirt. The second video is the continuity of the sentence occurring. So this man has just been flogged. He's being brought back to the vehicle of the Islamic police to be replaced by another victim, this woman, who will be told how to position herself and where. And you notice again that this was a painful sentence to endure. I would like to show one last excerpt, and for this I would please request that we go very shortly into private session.
Judgment doer.
Madame la greffière,
Court officer.
huis clos partiel, s'il vous plaît.
Private session, please. Court Officer.
Nous sommes de retour en audience
We are
publique,
back
Monsieur
in open session, Your Honour.
Merci beaucoup.
Judge Mindua, my thanks. Prosecution counsel may continue.
Another crime, which is the passing of sentences without due process. That's at count 6. People who failed to strictly follow the newly imposed rules were subjected to sentences passed extrajudicially by members of the organization, in particular the Islamic Police and the Hezbollah, or by the Islamic Tribunal. The evidence will show that the Islamic Tribunal was a tool created to impose the group's ideological and religious vision by all means, including through imposing harsh sanctions such as corporal punishments and amputation. The Islamic Tribunal was located at Hôtel La Maison. I will show you this place now. It's in the north of the city. It's this building modeled here that you see. The judges attended the proceedings of the tribunal with their weapons in an intimidating manner. They lacked proper judicial qualifications, and they had loyalties and affiliations to parties in the cases. Let me show you what I mean. So this is the video of the tribunal in session. This man here is the presiding judge. That's Uka Uka. And you see the weapon above his head. Others have the weapons on their laps. You will notice also the yellow folders that I was discussing earlier. Next to them, folders that are containing the police reports, the reports they're basing themselves on to sentence the victims. So in this video, you will see Uka Uka, who was the judge, the presiding judge. You will see Ahmad Al-Faqih Al-Mahdi, who was the head of the Hezbollah and also a judge in that tribunal. They are both from the Tuareg Kelansar tribe. And you will see Radwan, it's this man here, you see him already, wearing a black outfit, who is an Hakim member. And they're all armed. So this is Radwan in black, and this is Mr. Al-Mahdi. And you see he's holding his weapon, and Radwan is having his weapon on his lap. And that's the tribunal in session. The second short excerpt I would like to show you is also the tribunal sitting, but in another session. And here you see maybe a bit clearer that they have their weapons on their lap. And you will also get a clearer look at those yellow folders I mentioned already. So you see them there. You will see extensive photographic evidence in relation to these files during trial. Just to make you notice that on many of them, you also had some writings on top of the cover. This is simply to say what the case is about, if it's a criminal case, if it's a social case, and the case number. The next crime I will discuss is the crime of attacks on protected objects, and that's count 7. As you know, this crime occurred between 30th of June 2012 and mid-July 2012. A short period in itself, but long enough to destroy no less than 10 different sites and create irreversible damage. Some of these places could indeed be rebuilt, but others, such as the sacred door of the Sidi Yahya Mosque, that according to a well-known legend was never ever meant to be open, will never be the same. And needless to say that even for these sites that have been gradually built anew, witnesses will testify that the psychological damage to the population does remain irreversible. All sites were destroyed to the grounds. There were only ruins to be seen. I will simply show you one image to demonstrate my point. It's at the Three Saints Cemetery. So you see the circle on the satellite view. It's in the west of the city. And as the name suggests, there were 3 saints being represented in that cemetery. They each had a mausoleum. And I will show you 2 of these mausoleums. They are called El Miki and Atwati. I will slowly turn so that you see them better on the panoramic view. This is what's left of the El Miki mausoleum. It's clearly to the ground and has been completely destroyed. A few meters away was the Atwati mausoleum in the same cemetery. And this is what's left of it after destruction. It was quite a task to destroy all these holy places, and Mr. Al-Hassan agreed to have some of his men giving a hand to the Hezbollah to destroy these places. You will see and hear extensive evidence during trial on the presence of the Islamic police on all of these sites during the destruction. The next crime I will discuss is persecution based on gender and religious grounds. It's count 13. In relation to religious persecution, the list of prohibitions is endless. You already heard numerous examples yesterday by Madam Prosecutor and by the senior trial lawyer. I will not repeat. What is there to keep in mind is that no part in town was exempt from it. On top of the persecution on religious grounds, there was a specific targeting based on gender. Women were hunted down in the streets of Timbuktu, in schools, in hospitals, and sometimes in their own homes. They were harassed on a daily basis. They were harassed by police officers and members of the Hezbollah. Police officers patrolling armed around town. Police officers reporting back to HQ. We've seen it earlier before in my presentation, and you will see it in the evidence. And again, it was Mr. Al-Hassan who was the man dispatching these men, and he was the man in charge on the ground. Sanctions that were imposed in case of alleged breach of the newly imposed rules were systematic and harsh. The persecution suffered by women and girls resulted, among other things, in multiple arrests, inhuman and degrading detentions, floggings, sexual slavery, and rape. Just imagine. That's the daily life of a woman or a girl in Timbuktu at the time of the events. This is not a one-off. It's happening every day. It's happening in front of everybody. No one can ignore it. I talked about the BMS before. This is the place where Mr. Al-Hassan had his office, and it later became the headquarters of the Hezbollah. Well, at the BMS, there were not only offices with desks and chairs to receive complaints. There was also an ATM room, normal since it used to be a bank. But witnesses will testify that what is far from normal and human is that the groups Mr. Al-Hassan was a part of used this ATM room as a cell for women, or as it was nicknamed by the inhabitants themselves, the nightmare cell for women. I will show you this ATM now. Here we go. So you see the BMS here, and I'm pointing now at the ATM room. It's here. That's this, only this part here. When it comes to detention, evidence shows that these women could remain in detention for up to 72 hours in that little part of the bank, in that cell of 2 square meters only. And 2 square meters is rather small, and it feels even smaller when there are up to 13 women in there at the same time, in oppressive heat, without access to any care, and in deplorable sanitary conditions. Women had to relieve themselves on the ground there. Photographic evidence will be provided during trial to show you the inside of this ATM room. And witnesses will testify to the awful smell emanating from this room and the suffering of many women who were detained in it. I will provide you with one final example that is very telling of this crime of persecution and combines many of the crimes that I previously mentioned. A woman was chased in the courtyard of a house and arrested for not being properly covered. The armed men who arrested her whipped her on the spot. There was no police report there. They just whipped her on the spot. They threatened her when she refused to be taken to the prison cell there at the BMS. She was nevertheless taken to the BMS by these armed men, and she was raped there during her detention. Needless to say that being flogged in front of your family, arrested and raped for wearing a veil the wrong way is a highly disproportional price to pay and extremely humiliating. And it is, above all, a crime. There is simply no valid justification whatsoever for such acts and the application of such rules and harsh sanctions in Timbuktu. Yet, when he had the chance, Mr. Al-Hassan would explain that yes, it was justified. You previously heard him in one interview today. Witnesses will also testify to that. And I will provide you one extra example. An inhabitant tells us that one man was arrested and detained by Mr. Al-Hassan for having smoked cigarettes. He was severely beaten during his arrest and again severely beaten during his detention. When asked if this man could be released, Al-Hassan said that the man deserved what was happening to him. The next and final type of crime I will discuss is rape, sexual slavery, and forced marriage as other inhuman acts. Those are counts 8 to 12. These crimes took place in various places in town and cover at least 5 of the main districts in the city. Understand by that the whole town. The evidence will abundantly show that there were numerous cases of forced marriage and that the Islamic police was involved. I will now move away from the platform to use a map of the city center of Timbuktu. And on purpose, I will refrain from using P numbers for security reasons. But all the cases that I will mention now are related to forced marriage. To help, one moment. To help identify the locations, I've added 2 arrows. One is for the BMS, you see it here, and the other one is for the Gouvernorat. It's over there. Victim 1 was held captive in a hotel in the Kwarotao district. You see it all the way up on the map. Then her husband forced her to come with him in a house located in the Sanfil Amabangu district. She was raped there. Victim 2 was also detained in that same house in the Sanfil Amambangu district. She was raped there. Victim 3 was raped in a house located behind the big market in Timbuktu. You will remember that I showed you this market. It was in this specific rectangle shape. I'm pointing at it now. Victim 4 was gang raped at the Gouvernorat in the administrative district. Victim 5 was raped in a house in the Sankore district. Victim 6 was raped several times in a house in the Jingareber district, close to the Jingareber mosque. And finally, victim 7 was raped several times in a house in the Abaraju district. She was only 12 years old at the time. She said that her breast had not even developed yet. She was just a kid. Mr. Al-Hassan was aware of the existence of the marriage system, leading to cases of non-consensual sexual relations, as well as sexual slavery and other inhuman acts in the context of forced marriage. He himself supported this system. He admitted that he helped draft requests for financial support and that he helped negotiate a marriage for men who wished to get married. But who can really negotiate anything? Which weight and which value do you attribute to the so-called wife or her family's consent when they cannot say no? When they are being threatened in their own house by at least 3 or 4 men armed with Kalashnikovs? Under this highly coercive system of so-called marriages, it was, unfortunately for the victim, almost impossible to avoid getting raped. Thank you, Your Honors. That concludes my presentation.
Merci beaucoup,
Judge Mandua, thank you very much.
Monsieur Duterte.
Mr. Duchat, whose turn is it now?
Ça conclut effectivement, Monsieur le Président,
Mr.
Mesdames et
Duchat,
Messieurs, la
this does indeed
présentation,
bring to a close
parquet au
the
cours de cette ouverture du procès,
presentation
à la fois le
of
contexte, les
the
crimes,
prosecutor's
et ce que nous
statements
alléguons être la responsabilité
and with
de
regard
l'accusé
to
dans
the
ces
crimes
faits.
and the
Je
alleged
vous remercie.
responsibility of the accused in these facts. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Judge Mandua, thank you very much.
Nous arrivons au
This
terme de cette
marks the end
seconde audience
of the
consacrée au débat
second day
sur les fonds.
of the hearing.
Nous allons donc
We shall therefore
lever l'audience et
adjourn,
normalement nous devons
and
reprendre le 25
we
août
should reconvene on the
avec
25th of August
du premier témoin
with
du bureau du procureur.
the examination of the first OTP witness.
À présent, la Chambre souhaite
The Chamber
remercier
would like to thank
les interprètes,
the interpreters,
les sténotypistes,
the court reporters,
ainsi que les officiers de sécurité
and the security
pour leur
officers
coopération.
for their cooperation.
Prenez soin de vous
Take care of yourselves
la période des vacances judiciaires.
during the judicial recess.
Encore une fois, merci à tous.
And once again, thank you to you all.
L'audience est levée.
Court is adjourned.
All rise. Veuillez vous lever.